Welcome to the Cardiac Wire show from ACC 2025, and we have a great show for you. We're talking with Dr. Michael Ayers from UVA Medicine, and we're going to be talking about some of the research that he's doing into HCM detection. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so maybe you can give us a background, well, to start off, background into what you do at UVA and the HCM Center.
Sure, I'd love to. So I am the director of our Center of Excellence at the University of Virginia. There are around 50 designated centers of excellence around the country. We have around 1,000 to 2,000 patients in any given time.
Great. Now, it's been exciting to watch how the HCM space has evolved. Can you maybe give the viewers out there understanding of just the current situation for HCM detection and how it might be evolving, and then also a view into the treatment of HCM?
Great. So for starters, I would say HCM is underdiagnosed, it is misdiagnosed, and there are delays in diagnoses all the time. Taking a big step back, what we know about HCM is it's the most common inherited cardiomyopathy. It actually affects around 1 in 350 people. And the way that we know that is there's been several imaging studies that have been done around the world that have shown when you just image indiscriminately large groups of people, around 1 in 350 people meet criteria for HCM. But when you look at ICD-10 registries, what we find in America is we're diagnosing at rates of 1 in 3,000, which means if you do some quick math, around 90% of people who on imaging would have HCM don't have the diagnosis.
Right.
When you look at the group of people who are diagnosed, what you find is most of them have seen 2 to 3 cardiologists, not general practitioners, cardiologists over a period of 5 to 8 years before getting their diagnosis. Then when you look at people who are referred for HCM to centers like ours, what we find is 1 in 7 people referred, again, by a cardiologist for HCM don't have HCM, they have something else.
Right.
So it's underdiagnosed, it is misdiagnosed, and there's delays in diagnoses.
Right. And I understand for your research that you presented here at ACC, you use the Viz.ai's Viz HCM solution. Can you tell me more about that solution?
Yeah, so I know that AI is all the rage, and most physicians, when you hear that, they're a little bit reluctant to dip their toes in. So I'll tell you a little bit about this particular Viz.ai algorithm. So this is a neural network that was taught how to look for HCM on a large international set of 600,000 or some ECGs. And then through iterative processes of feedback from their designers, was taught to do it with more and more precision. Mm-hmm. Once they developed that algorithm, what they did is with the FDA, they tested it on a group of controls to see how the algorithm performed.
Right.
Now, when you have an algorithm like that, you have to actually set points. So you have to say, I want you to call it positive if you're this certain. I want you to call it negative if you're less than that. Mm-hmm. And so what Viz did is they worked with a lot of physicians to try and figure out what that set point should be. And what they decided, which I think ultimately was the right decision, was to make a set point where the positive predictive value, the likelihood that this is HCM, really is HCM, was very high. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of alerts in our in-basket all the time. Yeah. And if you start adding a bunch of alerts for people who don't really have HCM, you're going to get a lot of click fatigue. So they set a very high positive predictive value. Now, as part of that, the sensitivity suffered, which means the algorithm's not perfect at detecting HCM. In fact, it'll probably miss around 3 in 10 patients. But going from 10% of patients being diagnosed to 70 is a pretty huge delta.
It's massive.
Massive.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about the study.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
So what we did is we went back for 15 years in our system, and we pulled people with certain ICD-10 codes for HCM. We didn't pull all of our HCM patients. We tried to figure out how to do this in the cleanest way possible, and so we used the ICD-10. We found around 400 patients, which is probably around a third of the patients in our center. And what we did is we went back and looked at every ECG they've ever had in our system. And what we tried to figure out was what is the difference in time of when the algorithm would have said, this is HCM, versus when a clinician wrote in the chart, this is HCM.
Right.
What we found was that the positive and negative predictive values were pretty comparable to what Viz had done in the past. The positive predictive value was around 94, 95%. Mm-hmm. The sensitivity was in the 2/3 range, so it didn't call all of the people who had HCM as HCM. It missed a few. But the interesting part of the study was a quarter of patients would have been diagnosed by this algorithm a year earlier had the algorithm been running. And in fact, we had a handful of patients that were more than 5 years earlier. And we had one patient that would have been diagnosed 16.6 years earlier. I mean, that's a literal lifetime that they waited from when this algorithm would have said, hey doc, I think your patient has HCM.
With these earlier diagnoses, what would be the implications for treatment?
Well, to be honest, the most real implication is patients suffering, patients not getting the appropriate treatments. This is a highly comorbid disease. It comes with AFib, with heart failure, with rarely sudden death. But for the most part, it's patient symptoms not being treated for long periods of time in the delay.
Right.
We don't yet in HCM have true proof of what we call disease modification. So in rheumatology, they love to talk about DMARDs, drugs that if you start them early, change the disease course.
Right.
We think we're getting close in HCM, but we don't quite have enough data to say that for sure.
Right.
So I don't know that we would have modified a disease course, although I think we're getting close. But again, years and years of patient symptoms and suffering were not treated, and they could have been using this algorithm. The next steps for us is to figure out who are the patients that are experiencing these delays, and are there certain socioeconomic determinants of health that might be addressed by this algorithm? Because our hypothesis is there are certain groups that are less mobile in the health system that are probably suffering even more from delays in diagnoses.
Right.
And so stay tuned. I just wanted to make sure I put in a plug for where we're headed.
Great. Well, I can't wait to see what you find out, and thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you.